So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series we talk all things cloud with experts and advocates from right across the industry, covering a wide range of topics, from skills and careers through to technical content, soft skills, things like that. So, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or LinkedIn, thanks so much for joining us. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a comment, a like, and a subscribe if you can. It would really be appreciated. Okay, so my next guest, he is a Microsoft MVP. He's a blogger, a vlogger. He's a co-host of the awesome Cloud Conversations podcast. He's also the co-founder of the M365 Security and Compliance user group, and is currently head of security and compliance and identity at CPS. So, great pleasure. Hugely delighted to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Mr. Peter Rising. Hello, Peter. How you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, John. I'm well. I'm very well indeed. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. Yeah, I mean, as good as everybody else at the moment. It seems like the world's getting back to a little bit of normality. So I don't know about you. I think you were the same as me. Missed out on the South Coast Summit this weekend, which was a bit frustrating. I wanted to get down to that one, but couldn't. But yeah, doing good. But battling on, I think is probably fair to say. But well, Pete, thanks so much for joining me first and foremost. It's great to have you on the show. I've seen all the fantastic stuff that you're doing with the community yourself over the last 18 months since I've been a little bit more involved in this public world of community. I mean, just before we hit record there, I mentioned this could be, we've got some cool areas that we want to talk around now, mainly around security and compliance, and it'd be quite a cool area to kind of start looking at, the differences and some of the synergies between 365 and Azure.
Yeah.
But before we get into all of that, I don't know if you want to give yourself a proper introduction. Let us know a little bit about, your potted career history and how you've come to be to the position that you're currently at the moment. That'd be cool.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, John. So yeah, clear my throat first of all. My name's Peter Rising. You've already given me an amazing introduction, so I don't know how I can top it. But as John was saying, Microsoft MVP for just over a year now, and I'm currently working at CPS as head of Security, Compliance, and Identity Practice. Been there a very short time, but absolutely loving that. But very, very quick, bullet pointy career sort of overview. I started out in my career in, as you can probably tell by the grey hair and the grey beard, way back in 1988. So that gives away my age. I'm 49 years of age this year. But I started out selling Sony Walkmans in John Lewis's in 1988, and then over the course of through the 90s, I started working at a law firm as an office junior, sort of delivering letters and photocopying all of the jobs that nobody wants to do, that sort of thing. But eventually made my way into IT, as is the case with many people that we talk to on these sort of shows, as a happy accident. It was never intended. I had no direction. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life and career, but I was in the right place at the right time at this law firm when IT was just starting to kick off and word processors were just coming in to start replacing all the typewriters that the legal secretaries used to use and all that sort of stuff. So they got an IT manager. She very quickly became quite overwhelmed with all of the work that needed to be done, and she asked me, "Hey Peter, would you like to learn this?" So I thought, heck, why not? And that's how my journey in IT began. And I spent the next sort of, sorry, we're going to ask something there?
No. I was going to say you haven't looked back since, but no, you carry on, Peter. No, I'm with you so far. Yeah.
I know. I've really not looked back. There's never been any other career path for me since then. I've thoroughly enjoyed being in IT, and I've had a number of hats over the last 25 to 30 years. God, it's just mad to think of it in those terms. But I've worked for private organizations, a lot of manufacturing companies, mainly in the northeast of England, as their in-house IT administrator, IT manager, whatever title was going at the time. And then I got into consultancy, probably around 2014 it would have been, properly, I would say. I dabbled in consultancy in the sort of late 2000s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, in some small consultancies up in the Northeast, but got into some of the bigger nationwide ones in 2014 when I joined Softcat as a technical consultant, and that's when I started specializing in Office 365. So from there, I now found myself at CPS, and from going from an IT generalist who sort of did a bit of everything, Active Directory, Exchange, hardware, software, the lot, specialize in O365. I now find myself specializing even deeper within that platform in terms of focusing on security and compliance and identity.
It seems to be the way, doesn't it? Excuse me, Peter. But yeah, look, we're not too dissimilar in age. That's all I'm going to say. I got the greys coming, Pete. I don't think there's any shame in that. I think it's just the way that it goes, isn't it? But
yeah,
it sounds, the kind of the career history that you just described there is what I'm seeing is very similar to a lot of people. Maybe it's of our generation. Maybe because we came through that kind of 90s and 2000s era of computing where, look, I think if I'm reading it rightly, it was pretty much all hands on deck at that time, wasn't it? It was like there's someone with a plug on it. Yep, you're in charge of fixing that now. Go and sort it out. How do you find that kind of history and that experience that you've had doing those kind of things over your career? How do you find they played into cloud computing now, the era that we find ourselves in? Because there's still lots to learn. There's still lots of learning going on. There's lots of opportunity to learn and play and do new, cool, clever things. For those maybe coming into the industry new now, do you relate back to that experience a lot, or do you find that you're having to learn and use new experiences now? What's your take on that, Peter?
It's a really great question, and I think there's a mixture of both. Really, is probably going to be my answer. I'm sort of going to give you a sitting on the fence answer in a sense, in that I definitely find the experience that I've built up throughout my career in the technologies, specifically Microsoft technologies, are still relevant now in terms of what I'm doing with M365. The principles of something like Exchange Server to Exchange Online, they're very, very similar in real terms. It's basically messaging. So it's evolved, and I think being part of that evolution has been very, very helpful, knowing the history of how Active Directory was back in 2000 with Windows Server 2000 and all the various Exchange Server versions I've been through. But I totally embrace the cloud. I absolutely love it. I've been a cloud evangelist and enthusiast since Office 365 really first became widely known. Before that, it was BPOS, wasn't it? But when O365 became a thing, I like the sound of this, because I had however many years as an IT admin, the battle scars of rebooting servers and having them blue screen, and the idea to me that I would no longer be responsible for that hardware was massively appealing. I thought, this is something I can really get my teeth into, without a doubt. So I'm very, very progressive in terms of focusing on cloud and thinking that the on-premises way of life is something that we should be, on the whole, leaving behind us. But I think that history has absolutely helped me to fit into this world as well.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. I think it's it's like anything, I guess. We all look back on our our own history and the experiences that we've had in this kind of industry, in the tech industry, and I think it's probably fair to say, and the only reason I asked that is I questioned myself only a few weeks ago when I was thinking it's only natural, I guess, that we question our own experiences and look back on our own experiences and take that forward. But somebody said to me about new people coming into the industry fresh from university or college now, is that they're starting to see the world a little bit more differently, in the sense that I guess it came off the back of this concept of it just seems that there's a never-ending raft of things that you need to learn, especially in like the Azure developer side, the innovation side of things. And I don't know if it's the same anymore with 365, but I know there's certainly developer paths with Power Platform and things like that, coming more to the rise, this whole citizen developer. And I thought, how do new people come, without these experiences that the likes of us may have had, and others, of course, how do they come in? And somebody mentioned to me and said, look, it's more that they see themselves as technologists. It doesn't matter what it is that they have to reach out to and grab. And I thought, wow, that is a really, for me, that was a different way of thinking of it. That's why I thought I'd ask you the question to see if you saw it in a similar way or had any other insights. But it's definitely an interesting time I think we're going through. And like I said at the head of this program now, is that it's going to be cool if we start to delve into the more kind of technical aspects of 365, having that kind of, I'm going to call it a generalist background.
Yeah.
Have you found that experience in itself has stood you in good stead with 365 and I guess the ever expanding capabilities? How do you cope with those, Peter?
I absolutely do think that generalist background has helped me enormously to be able to both talk the talk and walk the walk in everyday Microsoft 365 life, because and purely from the point of view that you can be an SME, subject matter expert in any number of things across 365. You can be security, compliance, you can be collaboration, unified comms, messaging, all sorts of things. When you're talking to your customers, though, they quite often just see an IT person or an M365 consultant. So they're not going to shy away from asking you questions across those other disciplines of Microsoft 365. So that generalist approach to learning is definitely important as far as I'm concerned. You've got to have your focus area where you specialize, where your bread and butter is, where you spend most of your time. But you do have to be able to answer, certainly at a high level, questions on those other technologies, because everything ties together in M365, especially in Teams, because so much now is being surfaced in Teams as the hub. Things are being brought left, right, and center into Teams, and you have to speak lots of different languages within 365 in order to be credible. It's essential. So definitely think that experience has helped me without a doubt.
And what do you do to keep up with those changes in 365, Peter? It's been a little while, I must be honest. I was very much involved in messaging, unified comms, but I've taken my foot off the gas, so to speak, of those technology areas over the last couple of years. What's the best way, do you think, now with keeping up to speed with, the changes, the new features, that kind of stuff in the 365 landscape?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, the first one is to do the Microsoft certifications. That's a great, the learning paths that Microsoft have on their certification paths are absolutely superb. So, and they're refreshing the certifications regularly, and they are also making you refresh them each year now. So just to make sure that your knowledge is up to date in those terms. So once you've got the initial qualification, once you've got that, you're going to be able to keep that as long as you do an assessment each year just to validate that your knowledge is current. So that's a really great way of keeping your knowledge up to date. But also be proactive. Look at the right websites, tech websites. Look at getting involved in the community. There is lots and lots of ways to get involved in the community. Look at the Microsoft tech community forums at techcommunity.microsoft.com. I spend a lot of time on there, just trying to answer questions, and quite often the questions I don't know the answer to, and it makes me learn though. I'll think, I want to know what the answer to this is, so I go off and I docs.microsoft.com or Google and try and find the answer and teach myself in the process of being able to help others. So many. You do have to have a mindset for learning. I think you have to have that appetite to keep your knowledge up to date, because the landscape of Microsoft 365 is ever changing. It's not standing still. It's never going to stand still. Microsoft are releasing new technologies all the time across all of the pillars within the platform. So if you don't keep yourself informed, you're going to get left behind. So look to attend some of the Microsoft events as well. Like we've got Ignite coming up. If you can get registered for that, there is a ton of sessions that you can sign up for and get involved with, and many of them are interactive, and things like that will stand you in good stead for improving your knowledge. And also, most importantly, if you can, get yourself a demo environment, a test environment. Trial tenants are fairly easy to spin up for for 30 days. If you work for a Microsoft partner, you can also get access to the demos.microsoft.com and play with the technology. There's no substitute for experience. And with these sort of disposable demo test environments, you can play till your heart's content and get stuck in, find out how it all works.
No, I echo those thoughts. You mentioned there about the Microsoft Learn platform. I mean, Microsoft have massively invested, haven't they, in those learning modules, that learning content. It's phenomenal now, and I think in some instances they do allow you to spin up sandbox. I mean, from my point of view, they're okay in those Learn modules, but you don't kind of get that chance to, play properly. Play. So. Yeah, I like your idea there of getting that demo environment, or using demos.microsoft.com, because they do have quite a number of different kind of scenario-based demos, don't they?
There are so many, absolutely. I recently did a SharePoint syntax one, which was so good in the fact that it basically walked you through the whole scenario, and I used that as a presentation for a talk rather than doing traditional slides and my own sort of walkthrough of a tenant, and it was so good the way it was put together. The Microsoft.
Well, I suppose it's evergreen as well. I suppose within reason they've got the latest features that. Yeah, I mean, that's always been a tricky one, isn't it? Especially in the world of consultancy, when you're speaking to customers about new features and functionality, you might, have a deck or something prepared, and then something will come out, and it's right. Oh God, do I change that deck? It's got a different style. Oh, it's such a That's a cool way of looking at it, actually, isn't it? It's spinning up that demo environment, and talking customers through. No, absolutely.
And never be afraid to be caught out on the technology, because it changes so rapidly. I've been in front of customers with my slides all prepared and in a demo tenant, and I'm going through the various menus and structures and all that, and there's something there I've not seen before, and I never try and mask my reaction there. I say, oh, that wasn't there last week, this is new. So always be learning, and always show that you're always learning, because you can't be bang up to date. Nobody can know everything. So
I was going to say it's only a matter of time before somebody gets a T-shirt with "that wasn't there before" printed on its shoulder. That's got to be one of the most common phrases that we run at the moment. But at the same time, it's great, because we know that there's that pace of change, that innovation, and look, these features are being put out there for the benefit of business. And I spoke with somebody else before, and I think back sort of 5-6 years ago when Satya Nadella first said, introduce the term, this tech intensity term, and obviously empowering everybody to be able to achieve more effectively, through technology. And I remember thinking at the time, is that just another marketing tagline? Is that just a phrase? And it's like, wow, certainly you look back over the last 5 years and you think, right, okay, now I get it. Now I know what he meant by tech intensity. Yep. So I mean, yeah, it sounds as though, like I say, it's cool to have you on this show now, because typically we talk very much around the Azure space more often than not. It's cloud talk, and I always knew that we'd be talking a bit about 365. If I'm being honest, I've not talked a lot about 365 in the last year, 18 months since I've been doing these kind of things. So it's cool to kind of have the opportunity to talk to you, Peter, in terms of, even bringing myself up to speed a bit, in terms of where has 365 gone. So, I mean, look, I know that you're heavily focused on the identity management, the security side, security and compliance side. Do you want to give us a quick, sort of basic overview of how is that managed in 365, and where do you see the crossover with things like the Azure platform in terms of? I know it's probably quite a bit of a big open-ended, but are you able to frame that for us, Peter?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think whenever I'm starting to talk to a customer about the M365 journey, the one word that I always start with is identity, because gone are the days where you were on premises and your network firewall was your security perimeter, and in the cloud you can't wrap that firewall around it. So identity has very much become the new security perimeter for the modern workplace in Office 365, and there are a number of ways in which that identity can be provisioned. In its native form, Microsoft 365 is cloud only out of the box. It exists on its own, but majority of organizations that you tend to find as your customers and consultancies will have some sort of hybrid going on in terms of they've had a long time investment in on-premises Active Directory, lots of legacy stuff going on, and so they'll be synchronizing their on-premises AD to Azure AD. So with that, you can stand up a couple of options for identity, which are password hash synchronization, which will synchronize your on-premises accounts and passwords up to 365. There's pass-through authentication as well, which is really comes into play when you want or need to have authentication for your Office 365 users logging on to come back to your on-premises, authenticate through on-premises rather than the cloud. And that's really the modern version of ADFS, shall we say. So ADFS...
Is that agent-based installation?
Correct.
That hooks up
yeah.
with... right, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in order to make that highly available, you've got to put agents on, ideally in all of your Active Directory sites, locations, to make that highly available and resilient. So, and that brings the authentication back to on-premises. And both of those, password hash sync and pass-through authentication, both support seamless single sign-on, which means if you're logging into your Windows 10, Windows 11 now, computer, you log on with your O365 credentials, Azure AD joined or hybrid Azure AD joined, whatever it may be. Once you're in, you go into your various M365 services and portal.office.com or any number of the URLs that can get you into M365 cloud services. It's not going to challenge you for those credentials again. That's what seamless single sign-on is doing. There's a little bit of fiddling about to get that going. It's fairly straightforward, but it's set up in the Azure AD Connect setup. When you set that up for the first time, there's a little tick box to enable it, but you also have to get that to your endpoints by way of either regedit or group policy, just to add a couple of URLs in as trusted sites. But that works really well. But ADFS is something that is sort of slowly dying out. Federation is very, very. I always say to customers, if you're not using ADFS now, chances are you'll never need to. Pass through authentication is probably going to be for you, because with ADFS you're going to need 2 on-premises ADFS servers, at least, possibly more depending on your infrastructure. You're going to need web application proxies in your DMZ as well, just to make sure you're being safe and secure and routing the traffic in the back to on-premises and in a secure way. And it's a point of failure as well. There are things that even when you make it highly available, it's just such an investment now. So I tend to say you don't really need ADFS anymore. So those are the means of provisioning your identity, and that's the important thing to get right from day one.
And I guess, Peter, some of the decision points around there, like you say, I remember back in the day with ADFS, it was always seen as a bit of a hammer to crack a nut in terms of keeping that point of authentication against your on-prem. Because do we see it a lot now then in terms of customers still having that same concern? Because it always used to be, from my recollection, that ADFS was used because they didn't want to synchronize even password hashes up to AD, Azure AD. Are you still seeing that now generally with customers, or are they a bit more accepting of the technologies now? Well, what's your take on where we are now, Peter?
I think in general, there's a lot more trust in the security of M365 technologies now than there was 8 or 9 years ago when I first started getting into this. There was not the trust there then that there is now. I think Microsoft have proven that they are committed to providing a secure and compliant environment. The fact that they are constantly pushing and developing the E5 suite of products with new and exciting stuff all the time is a reflection of that. But you do still sometimes get regulated organizations or risk-averse organizations who do still think in those terms because they either want to or have to. So in that situation, usually pass-through authentication will be for them, because it's going to give them that control, bringing things back to on-premises, and they're not going to get those password hash syncs going across up to 365. But password hash sync is absolutely safe and secure, though. It's a hash of the password, and it's never in clear text. So and it's recommended by Microsoft. That is their go-to as a rule of thumb. They suggest do password hash sync if you have no particular reason not to do anything else.
Yeah, I remember password hashing. Well, it probably still is. I don't know. It used to be the backup against ADFS. So in the event, of course, with ADFS, this is the thing, wasn't it? It was always you needed 2 for high availability in case one goes down, because you lose it, you've lost access to your 365. And I remember
exactly
a few years ago now, they said, well, actually, use your password hash sync, and you can just flip your domain over and start using the cloud stored hash rather than ADFS. And I remember hearing at the time thinking, well, why would you go back to ADFS then?
Exactly, exactly. Because getting off ADFS, that has to be very, very carefully planned. You have to be mindful that it can take time for those changes to be populated all around the big old World Wide Web. When you stop federating your domain and you bring it back to be managed in Office 365, that can take Microsoft. They give themselves at least 72 hours for that change to take effect. Right. So it doesn't necessarily have to take that long. I've seen it take very little time, but you have to be prepared for that just in case.
A bit of a delay. In terms of things like, we see a lot more today in general, not just in the Microsoft space, about multi-factor authentication and even passwordless. Where do we sit now in terms of Azure AD with those more modern components, I guess, opposed to trying to use those with things like ADFS? Because I remember there used to be this physical server thing that you could install to enable MFA, and I think that kind of went away. So, where are we at the minute, Peter, in terms of those passwordless, those MFA type technologies?
So MFA is an absolute must in terms of security principles. It's probably the basic defining principle of what is widely becoming acceptably known as zero trust. It's the first thing you do to secure your identities is enable multi-factor authentication in Office 360 in your Office 365 or M365, and that's very, very straightforward to do. You can do that just on its own with Office 365 E3 licenses. Very, very simple to do, and you can have a number of different ways to authenticate. You can have the Microsoft Authenticator app, where you can have a 6-digit code that you have to input into the device you're trying to log into as the secondary form of authentication. It can just send you a notification to approve, which is a little bit too easy, I think, sometimes. Text to phone. There's a few different methods that you can use for MFA, but MFA is an absolute must, especially with password hash sync. Always have MFA enabled, not just for your privileged users, but for all of your users. And it's alarming how many organizations in these times still haven't got that message. That I think it's slowly but surely starting to get through, but there are still so many people who do not have that in place. And when you see the vulnerabilities that have been highlighted in recent times, Exchange on premises vulnerabilities, things like the I can't remember the name of it. No, it's gone. But there was a high-profile Exchange hack not that long ago, and there's more Exchange on premises auto-discover sort of vulnerabilities just been talked about in the last few days. And this is so important because most organizations who are in that hybrid identity position, where they're synchronizing between on-premises and 365, they probably have, or if they haven't, they should have one Exchange on-premises server still in place, because that's the supported Microsoft position. It's annoying as hell. I don't know why it hasn't been got rid of yet, because I've been wanting rid of it since I've been working in 365, because I think the whole point of getting to the cloud is it's in the cloud. Why should I have to keep at least one Exchange server? But it's clearly a problem that Microsoft are finding tough to crack. There's obviously some particular reason why it's a head scratcher for them, because to stay supported, you must have that in place to manage attributes like secondary SMTP addresses. And I mean, it is very, very handy in terms of it naturally stays in place as a SMTP relay server as well. But it is a bit of an annoyance.
Yeah, I remember back in the days where I used to dabble a bit with Exchange. It was two things, wasn't it? It was always a management point to stop you going into ADSI edit or advanced properties in
that's right.
Azure Active and completely making a pig's ear of something that is probably quite important. And yeah, those SMTP relay perspectives where it was always the case where on-prem peripherals, scanners, copiers that you didn't necessarily want to spend an SMTP, pay for a license in 365. You could route through that server. Is that still generally the case with Exchange Hybrid?
That's what people tend to do still, yeah. It's still used very, very heavily as that SMTP relay.
Well, of course, we say that it's got to be kept on-prem. Well, of course, we could put it in Azure as an IaaS server.
That is true.
In fact, that was how I got my first foray into Azure, as it happens, is doing those kinds of bits of work with, putting the domain controller and, it's very much extended data center kind of work. But, yeah, in terms of security, though, Peter, those kind of features that we can switch on, we can license bigger and better features, security features, dependent on the SKUs.
Correct.
Now, in terms of we know that there's overlap in the majority of things that go on in the Microsoft ecosystem, and I think we said at the beginning, when you've got that kind of generalist kind of mindset and you move into cloud, one of the things I always said to people is that I personally had to become a pseudo security consultant because I was dealing with 365 and it's kind of baked into the product. And I think you said, customers expect you to be there to answer those questions. And, I don't know about you, Peter, but I look at security consultants to be these guys that sit in back offices constantly hammering away at Linux boxes. And, it's a very stereotypical generalist view I have. No, but you know what I mean? Walking around with Wi-Fi antennas and long hair and, metal stickers stuck to their rucksacks.
Well, I've got the long hair.
I joke. But, well, there we go. I joke, of course. But have you seen it in a similar light? As security now got to this point within the Microsoft ecosystem that it's very much, a discipline in its own right. Don't get me wrong, we know that security is a discipline in its own right. But from just a Microsoft view of the world, what are the overlaps, would you say, in terms of, we mentioned Azure AD and identity management, but when it comes to other security concepts and compliance concepts, are there any obvious overlaps between the 365 cloud platform, the productivity suite, and something like the Azure platform? Have you got any obvious things that you can point out on that front, Peter?
Definitely. The obvious one that probably springs to mind is the correlation that is now in place between Azure Sentinel, the SIEM tool of Microsoft's. I never know if I'm saying that right. Some people say SIEM, others say SIM, and to me it's SIEM.
I say SIEM, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And Sentinel integrates very, very closely now with Microsoft 365 Defender. So you can get your Sentinel incidents within Defender and take actions on them to protect your identities and your endpoints. So that is really cool. So Azure Sentinel is clearly in the Azure camp. It's in the Azure portal. It's not Azure Active Directory, which Azure AD, we were talking just before we came on air, that's kind of like the bit that joins the two together, really. Azure Active Directory sort of is the glue between pure Azure and Microsoft or Office 365. These labels are so confusing, actually. Microsoft don't help us at times with things like that, for sure. But yeah, there is a lot of. I find myself. I'm not an Azure person by any means, but I find myself in the Azure portal quite often because there are things that to me are Microsoft 365 services or Azure AD services that live in there in the Azure portal. Things like Azure AD conditional access, which for those of you who may not know what that is, that's sort of the evolution of basic multi-factor authentication. That's what you do next to improve your security posture. We're looking at and what it is at its core. It's if this happens, then do that tool. So if this user is trying to log into this service on this device from this location, then do this, so allow them or block them, or that's what it is in its most basic form. But that lives in the Azure portal. But to me, that's an M365 administrative service. So there are a lot of things like that for sure. But conditional access is a big one. That is so powerful and so important. There's other things. I mean, there's a correlation between Azure Information Protection, as it was initially known, and I still call it that out of habit, and sensitivity labeling in the Security and Compliance Center, or just the Compliance Center, because we've got that to cope with now as well. There was just the Security and Compliance Center, but now they've separated those out because the technologies that are purely security or purely compliance are evolving and growing so much that they warrant their own centers. But then there are technologies that arguably can fit into both camps, because something like cloud app security, the cloud access brokerage tool that Microsoft have, it's cloud app security by definition, but it also does compliance actions like applying sensitivity labels. You can use it to apply sensitivity labels with Azure Information Protection. So there is tons of crossover, and you do have to have the foot in both camps sometimes, and it can be quite helpful because it forces you to keep learning and helps you to understand when you talk to people who are maybe more on the side you are in now, the pure Azure side, and almost hold a conversation about some of the deeper technical aspects of that. So yeah, but I think at times it could be clearer. It could be a bit more defined than it is.
Yeah, I guess that's part of bringing it up as a conversational piece, because I think some, like we said before we started recording this, is that I think, certainly for people that have been in the industry for a long time, it's sometimes too easy to forget that we built up this raft of knowledge through using trial and error, demoing, testing, installing, configuring, all of these different customer projects over the years. And sometimes it can become second nature, can't it? That you say, oh, well, yeah, I go here for that, I go there for that. And then before you know it, you're doing a lot of things that, and I think that's when Microsoft wake up sometimes, don't they, and go, yeah, we're going to try and simplify this a little bit and bung it all into a single portal. And but, I mean, your point around the SIEM system is a really, it's a really cool point. And, certainly, with Sentinel on the rise from a security kind of, SIEM and SOAR, isn't it? So that orchestrated response mechanism as well to potential vulnerabilities or attacks. I mean, have you had much dealings with that Sentinel product yourself, Peter, or are you looking at it from a Defender perspective at the moment?
More from a Defender perspective at the moment in my current life at CPS, where we're very early into defining some of our propositions, but that will absolutely be on the roadmap as we go through that journey. It's got to be. We're going to be looking at the whole picture, but for right now, it's firmly within the camp of M365. It's looking specifically at information protection and governance. It's looking at risk management, and it's definitely looking at zero trust, because zero trust is here to stay, whether you want it to be or not. It's the buzz term of the minute in terms of cybersecurity, and it's there for a reason.
Yeah, and I guess, again, back to the portal concept. You look at 365, you've got the Security Center, the Compliance Center, and you've also got the Azure Security Center. So they're different things for different purposes, I guess. I mean, what's your take on that, Peter? How do you kind of explain those things away? Do you have a nice presentation, or do you just hope people get it?
I don't think I do, really. I think I just it's one of those shrug my shoulders moments, and I say, good old Microsoft. But yeah. I think sometimes Microsoft, I always hesitate to criticize, but sometimes you need to. They could be a little bit quicker sometimes to move away from the old and embrace the new. The old sticks around for a bit too long, maybe, and creates confusion. To me, the security and compliance portal combined should be gone now, because Microsoft don't want you to use it, but it's still there. But I get why they take the time. I mean, the legacy Exchange Online admin centers literally just gone not too long ago. Because there's the flip side of that. There's people who take that away from me at your peril. So they've got to consider that not everybody thinks as I do and wants to look forward. There are plenty of people who it takes more time. So that's just a people thing, I guess, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And, it's like anything. But, I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, you've got to kind of, at some stage, get stuck into some of these portals. If security, compliance, and identity management is something that interests you as an IT pro or whatever it may be that you're doing,
definitely.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of getting in, using those key points that you mentioned earlier about learning and staying on top of these things. And I'm with you with the shrug your shoulders moments. It just seems to be that, look, I mean, I tend try not to criticize. You're right, though. There are times when you can criticize, but I think it's like anything. Microsoft seem to be, one of the only major vendors that are really kind of pioneering these things in the way that they do. And, granted, I personally may be biased because, like you, Peter, I've worked with Microsoft products for a number of years. But, it's certainly, there's a reason I pinned my career prospects working with this particular vendor. And they seem to have this way of doing things, don't they, where version 1.0 of a product gets released or feature gets released and everybody goes, yeah, that's not very good. That's really not very good. And that's fine. Some people hook into it. Version 2.0 comes out and then people start taking a little bit of notice and go, okay, yeah, it's still not as good as this other vendor. And then by version 3, 4, all of a sudden, they're in that kind of top right magic quadrant kind of Gartner report status.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see things in a similar way.
Oh, definitely, and you could almost say that that's going on right now as we speak with Windows 11. It feels like it's kind of been thrown out there, not fully realized, not fully complete, and Microsoft is sort of letting us work the bugs out of it to a certain extent, which is why I won't be touching it for a while.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's always that chance of completely royally ruining your production PC. Yeah, I've not upgraded yet either. I'm staying away from that for a little while. I was on the Insiders program for a little bit with my other laptop and regretted it every couple of months. It was like, yeah, there's my Wi-Fi driver gone out the window again.
Yeah. The key to that is never ever use your production device, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not doing it.
Yeah.
But Pete, this has been a fun conversation. I'm keen to talk to you, to change tracks slightly now and talk to you a little bit around community and your involvement with community, because I know you're doing some fantastic things at the moment. I mean, do you just want to talk us through, how did you get to become a Microsoft MVP? What were you up to? What are you doing with the podcast that you got going on at the moment? That'd be cool.
Sure, yeah. Well, it all started, this journey with community started when I started taking Microsoft certifications, because historically I was not somebody who enjoyed anything academic or doing exams. I'd never passed an exam in my life.
Have you found any of those people, Peter? Because I'm still looking for them.
Yeah, I know what you. There are. No, I have found people who strangely seem to enjoy it, but I always avoided it like the plague, and it got to the point where, in the consultancy I was working at the time, my practice lead said to me, you're very good at your job. You customers like you, etc., all the things you want to hear from your boss. But the glaring omission in your CV, if you like, is you don't have any certs. So, long story short, I started doing them, and I managed to get a couple. Much to my surprise, I couldn't believe I'd passed. And this was the old Office 365 MCSA exams, which no longer exist. Not easy exams, actually, especially the second one. But I kind of got the, even though I would never say I enjoy exams to this day, but I kind of got the bug for it. I kind of thought, yeah, I can do this, so let's try and rattle some off. And was fortunate enough to get through quite a few. And from that came, again, the happiest accident that's really occurred in my life. A publisher reached out to me on LinkedIn, Pax Publishing, and said, we notice you've got this MS500 qualification, the Microsoft Security Administration exam. And it had not long been out of beta at the time. It was quite new. Not many people had it. There was not much in the way of training materials. And they said, would you be interested in writing the exam guidebook for us? My initial reaction was, really, what, me? Totally thinking, no, I can't. That's what other people do. That's not something I could do. But they didn't go away. They sort of like didn't take no for an answer and came back and said, we think we could help you to write this book. And writing always has been something I've enjoyed. It's a passion of mine. And I always said to my wife for many, many years, if I had the time and the motivation, I always felt there was a book in me. I never thought it would be a technical book. That came as a surprise. And it's motivated me even more now that I am a published author to maybe get to a point where I maybe write something more fiction or something like that. But I wrote the book. I wrote the exam guide, and that just kicked things into gear. And it was my professional services manager at the time where I worked, a really cracking guy. You won't mind me mentioning his name, called Gareth Bowen. He now works at Microsoft. He's doing a cracking job there, working in AI sort of stuff, managing a really, really good team. And he said to me, this book, what you're doing, this is the sort of thing that could get you into the Microsoft MVP community. Again, I was like, wow, really? And I'd known through LinkedIn and Twitter of 2 or 3 of the more well-known, more historic MVPs in the UK, and I'd always seen those as put them on a pedestal and thought, oh yeah, that's not me. But I thought, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I'll give it a go. And I didn't fully understand the journey to begin with. I had my first sort of conversation with the MVP community program lead at the time after I was nominated for it, and I didn't immediately realize that it has to be completely outside of your job. It's nothing to do with what you're doing. Even if you're doing things in your job which are mentoring or for good causes and the like, not relevant. It has to be in your own time of your own volition. So once I got that in my head and understood what it was, I got the bug for just being involved in community, and how it started was just answering those posts on the Microsoft Tech community forums and really getting a buzz out of being able to help people. And when they sort of say thank you, you've really helped me here, and mark your answer as the best response, it's such a nice feeling to know you've made a difference to their day. And I always liked writing, so I was blogging, all that sort of stuff. I started getting into speaking at user groups and online conferences. Because I started my community journey in the time of COVID, early in 2020. I've never spoken in public, in person. I've never been on a stage, and to be honest, I can't say that I'm too bothered about that. I'm quite happy in the little virtual world. I'll certainly do it if it ever gets to that point, but I'm quite happy in the way it is. But yeah, and slowly but surely I just got more involved in the community. I met people like your good self, and I met other people who had walked the path that I'd been on and become recent MVPs. People like Chris Horde. I'll call out Chris because Chris was massively influential to me, and he sort of recommended me and gave me tips on things to do and how to get more involved, and took me under his wing for Teams Nation and the like. And then in October 2020, my jaw dropped when I was awarded. After a period of, I don't know, must have been 6 to 8 months, something like that, after being nominated. Never in a million years did I A, think it would happen, or B, think it would happen that quickly. But being in this community has been the best thing I've ever done. The people I've met, well, I say that I've met because I've not really met anybody.
Yeah, virtually, absolutely.
But I've got friends for life out of this, not least of which would be my my partners in crime on Cloud Conversations, the little podcast stroke YouTube show, much like what you're doing here that we do with Rue Campbell and Kat Green. And I've never met either of them, but they're very, very dear friends, and Rue's recently been made MVP as well. But it's so great. I'm sure you found the same. I'm sure your story is very, very similar.
No, it is, and I like to ask this question of others because not just a kind of it's very similar kind of storyline, but I guess to try and inspire others. And you said exactly the same things that I say when people reach out to you. You think, yeah, that's not me. That's somebody else you need to speak to for that. And we hear a lot about this kind of this imposter syndrome where you think you're not worthy, and sometimes it takes other people to turn around and say, no, actually, Peter, you are worthy because look at the credentials you've got and look at the experience you've got. It's just your own mind playing tricks on you. And if that can help others realize,
definitely,
actually, everybody has got their own view on a particular situation, whether that's completely non-tech related or it fits into our little tech world and community that we kind of live in and enjoy living in, I guess. It's that, I guess there's far more people out there that feel they can't do this kind of stuff, and the answer is always yes, you can. Just give that little nudge and a way to go. And look, I was the same. I was very much like you mentioned there. You see the renowned MVPs that have been MVPs with Microsoft for a number of years, and you hold them on that pedestal because they've helped you, throughout your career. No doubt you've followed them, you've read their blogs, you've watched their videos or whatever it is that you may have done, and read their books, and all of a sudden, then you as an individual are kind of being held at the same level. You think, no, God, that's not me, but it kind of is. You come to that realization that you are helping others, and I guess. For me, that's what you mentioned it there, getting that little bit of feedback from somebody saying, no, that's great. Thanks for giving me your answer. That's helped. That's kind of made my day. It's solved the problem for me. Just being able to do that and getting those messages back is, for me, what kind of spurs me on to keep going. And I love doing these videos with other members of the tech community because I think I mentioned to somebody the other night, I think I'm up to about episode late 40s. I'm nearly at a year's worth of one a week for nearly a year now.
Cool.
And the amazing people that I've spoken to, when I started this, you think, I'm just going to have a chat with people in the tech community that are doing similar things, get their take. And the amount that I've learnt and the patterns that I've spotted speaking to people, it's just like very profound. Do you know what I mean? Just literally having a chat. So, I mean, I'm guessing you get the same kind of things out of community, Peter. Yeah,
definitely. I learned so much from everyone I'm lucky enough to meet in this community journey, in all ways, shapes, and forms. Of guests that we've had on our show. Absolutely, some really inspiring stories, and we like to hear, as you do, everything about our guests, their career journey, their technical journey, their life goals and challenges and passions, and the whole thing. And we just have a really good chat as you and I are doing now, and it just feels so natural. But it's absolutely superb, and it's such a rewarding community to be in. And the one thing that I always say about it, it's unique as a community in the respect that, certainly this has been my experience, that there's really no egos in it as a rule. A lot of communities, a lot of things like this can get a little bit elitist, or a little bit, bun fights going on and nastiness, and you don't ever really come across that from anyone in this community. Everyone's just so generous with their time and giving and wants to help. So that's what I love about it.
Exactly the same conversation with my last guest was exactly that, and I said the same thing. It's I came into it like from a public learning kind of aspect, thinking, oh, people are going to judge me. People are going to start leaving negative comments because it's social media and they can. And honestly, it's been, I've had exactly the same kind of experiences as you've just demonstrated, that openness and that willingness. And it makes me want to do more. It makes me want to help others more than, and it's just such a, it sounds, I say to people, it sounds cliched, because there was a point in my life where I would have said, oh, that's a bit cliche. That's a bit, I'm a bit cynical, a bit long in the tooth. I haven't got time for that. And it's just none of that, it's none of that. And I like to talk about it because I think, if it helps those other people that maybe are standing on the peripherals thinking, oh, I can't do that, or oh, that's not me, get involved. Honestly, get involved, because it's more than the more than meets the eye, I guess, isn't it? You just don't know.
Definitely.
Like you said, you are now a published author. I bet a million years you were never thinking that was going to be an outcome of this journey for you.
Not a chance. Not a chance. I still can't believe it, quite frankly. It just seems insane.
Yeah, but why not, eh? At the end of the day, you've done it, you've got it out there, you've got the knowledge, and you've done that. And back to the point as well, very much the same. You look at your own self and think, yeah, that's not me. But it takes others to go, it is you, and that's the thing, isn't it? And I think lifting other people up as well is a big thing that I get personally a lot of, gratitude out of, because you can see a lot of hard work, effort, determination that lots of people are putting in. And look, if me, John Lunn, doing a little YouTube video can give somebody a bit of a nudge that makes their day or makes their hour even, then why wouldn't you do that? Why doesn't everybody just do that? It's far easier to be polite, nice, and supportive than, like you say, to be one of the haters. Which
exactly.
Let's not talk about them. Time for it.
Exactly. It is so important. You're absolutely right, John. To lift people up, to help them on their way in this journey, to give back, to pay it forward, to use an expression. Because what I found, imposter syndrome you mentioned, I've pretty much had that all my life, long before it was. It's got a name now. It's a very, very appropriate name. But I've my whole career I've thought I'm not good enough. I'm kind of like I'm getting away with it. I shouldn't be in this position. And it's really validating when people tell you otherwise and say, no, we appreciate what you're doing. And I still don't believe it, but it helps. It goes so far. But so many people have this, don't they? It's
a weird one, isn't it? It is, yeah. No, I was going to say it is a strange one, because I think if you ask anybody if they're truthful, they suffer, because I certainly do. I suffer with exactly those thoughts, and I try and relate to when I first recognised, I suppose, that was this thing that we now call imposter syndrome. It was a case of, I suppose, I played in bands and been up on stages, so I was always a little bit more of that extrovert personality, if you like, so I didn't mind. But I still had those feelings of, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not really in the right position. But then when other people are sat around you going, actually, no, you're doing really well, sometimes I think you've got to take a step back and listen to other people. And and if other people are saying this to you, you might not feel it, you might not think it, but I don't think many people are going to say, a convoy of people are going to say the same thing for you not to take it. And I suppose that's advice across the board for anybody watching. Don't just sit there feeling unworthy or like
completely
you're in the wrong crowd, because if people are telling you you're not, you're probably not. So
yeah, it's so easy to tell other people this, isn't it? But taking your own advice, drinking your own champagne, eating your own dog food, whatever you want to call it, it's the hardest thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Look, I'm 100% with you. But, I think it's been an interesting 18 months, I suppose. And I think if nothing more than locking us all in rooms and having nothing more than a camera, and a virtual world to interact with, I'm sure that's taught, for as much bad that's come out of that situation, I'm sure that there is positives that it's helped people, have to kind of address some of these things. Maybe, I don't know, but...
I think so. Definitely. I think definitely in terms of getting environmental here, the planet, we've cutting down on unnecessary travel and realizing that we can do these things remotely. Sure, human contact is very, very important. We don't want to take that away. And you and I both just missed out on South Coast Summit, which I was quite devastated at that, but couldn't go for various reasons. But I think we shouldn't just rush back to the way it was, because the way it wasn't working completely. There's room for other ways of doing things, and we have to be responsible to this little old planet of ours and take care of it for future generations. Because mindful of in the UK where you and I are, our royal family had a TV program on last night, the Earthshot Prize, and initiatives like that I think are hugely important to taking us in the right direction. And there are so many little things that you can do that can have massive change for the future.
Oh, 100%. And I don't disagree in the slightest. I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see that we don't necessarily get back to the way things were, but it's going to be somewhere in the middle, isn't it? But hopefully,
definitely, I hope so.
Hopefully, somewhere more sustainable, like you say, and a bit more eco-friendly. But Peter, this has been a super fantastic conversation. Loved having you on the show. Thanks so much for giving up your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Would you believe we're hitting the hour mark now? I told you, didn't I? It doesn't take long to get there.
Yeah,
But,
I know. That's the mark of a good chat. It's always a good sign when you can't believe how quickly it's gone.
no, and obviously we've got other things to do with our day as well, haven't we? So at the end of the day, we've got to get back to work and
better go
do
some
all
work.
that good stuff. Pete, I've got all the links to all your podcasts, your YouTube channel. I'm going to put them all below, so everybody that's watching, click on the link below. You'll see all the links to Pete's Twitter, LinkedIn, all the podcasts, the YouTubes, and everything like that. So it leaves me to say thanks so much for being an awesome guest, Peter. Been a pleasure to have you on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and we must have you come visit us on Cloud Conversations soon.
Yeah, anytime at all. But no, thanks for being an awesome guest. Yeah, we'll catch up on the socials now, I'm sure. But thanks a lot, Pete.
Amazing.
Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Ta-da. Bye.